Namaste. Welcome to Bharat Vichar. Today, our guest is Arshia Malik. She is a school teacher, a cultural critic, an Indian Muslim, and a blogger from Kashmir. Arshia Malik, suswagatam.
Thank you.
Arshia,
बहुत
धन्यवाद. Arshia, my first question to you is that there is an unheard connection of Kashmiri king called Gonanda I, who fought in the Mahabharata, and how there is a complete genealogy of kings of Kashmir till the 12th century AD. I mean, the history is there, but I think somewhere down the line it got lost. So if you could just talk about that for...
I'm very proud of the fact, we are very proud of the fact, we Kashmiris, that we are the only state in India which has an uninterrupted history right from the Mahabharata war. Pandit Kalhan in I think the 12th century, 1100s, wrote the Raj Tarangani, and he was a court historian. He was a lot of things. I'm assuming he was a polyglot as well, but we don't have much on him. We are still discovering him. And he wrote the Raj Tarangani. Raj Tarangani means the river of kings, the saga of kings. And there you start with King Gonanda I, who fought in the Mahabharata war, possibly with the Sri Krishna's men.
Pandavas.
No, Sri Krishna's men. There was an exclusive force.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yes. Right. Yes. Not the whole army, but Sri Krishna had some certain,
his own kin.
His own kin. Yes. So that's where it starts. Then Pandit Kalan started the genealogy, Gonanda II, and then there are others, and then the Utpala dynasty, and everything. It comes down to the 12th century till he was alive. The Raj Tarangani continues by three other authors, Jana Raja. So there are actually 4 Raj Taranganis. But Pandit Kalhan's is the best because its English translation is very famous by Mr. R.S. Pandit, brother-in-law to Jawaharlal Nehru. They were both in jail. I guess Nehruji was writing his Discovery of India, and Sri R.S. Panditji was translating the Raj Tarangani, which is in an ancient, I think it's a dialect of Sanskrit. I'm not sure, you'll have to ask some historian, but I've read it in English. And yes, Kashmir has an uninterrupted history from the Mahabharata war. Secondly, आपका Amarnath cave है. The whole route to the Amarnath cave is mixed with these little shrines on the way, where the legends say that the Pandavas, eventually when they left for the Himalayas, so it's called Pandavlar. If you see an ancient ruin, if you ask the locals, they say, we ask them ये क्या है, so they say ये Pandavlar है. Pandavlar in a sense कि पांडवों का है. So there are lots of them scattered throughout Kashmir. And in the Amarnath cave also, there are these figurines, 5 figurines, which are said to represent the Pandavas. So Kashmir has a connection with the Mahabharata.
And how it all ended after the 12th century AD?
It hasn't ended. The thing is that when Islam came to Kashmir, when Islam came to Kashmir, eventually, as it happens, indigenous cultures, indigenous traditions, indigenous theology, either gets suppressed or it gets mixed up. In Kashmir, what has happened is that there was a homogeneity. It got mixed up with Islamic theology. And of course, what we have our own, because Kashmir is also called as Rishivar. Rishivar means the residence of the Rishis, the wisdom of the Rishis over the years. And of course, Kashyap Rishi, famous, jiski wajah se Kashmir ka naam hai. So we developed a unique philosophy that is called Kashmir Shaivism, the Shaivite tradition. Fortunately, it's taught in the US and UK universities. Unfortunately, it is still not popular in the Indian universities. And I'm hoping that something can be done about it.
I certainly hope so too. And I would certainly be buying the English translation of the Raj Tarangani.
Yeah. And so it hasn't got lost. We grew up with it. I mean, these tales were told to me by my grandfather, my father, my uncles, and they're all Muslims, of course. So every Kashmiri grows up with these legends and folk tales, how Kashmir came to be, Kashyap Rishi, and how he put his foot, the demon Jalodbhava. And then we grow up and we learn about the geology of Kashmir, and we understand how these legends came into being. The Nagas who used to live there, and Nag kya hota hai, springs, the springs that come there. So it's not lost actually. it seems lost to you because after 1990s, there's a completely Arabized narrative coming out of Kashmir. There's a completely Islamism, Islamist narrative coming out of Kashmir, and mostly because of mainstream journalism and television. Otherwise, it's not lost. It's still there. I mean, every child, even today in the villages, grows up with this folklore. Um, it's a part of our heritage. It's a part of our culture. And हमारी जो national, you could say, poetess है, state की जो poetess है, Lalla. The KPs used to call her Laleshwari. The Muslims call her Lalla Arifa, or Lalded. Lalded means grandmother Lalla, and she has suckled Nund Rishi, another wise person, Sufi mystic. She suckled him at her breast. I mean, these are things that we grow up with. So it's not lost. It's simply that it's gotten suppressed by the mainstream narrative coming out of Kashmir, which I'm hoping to change,
We
and
need to
others
bring
like me.
this out of obscurity into the
Yes.
light.
Yes.
Now, the reason I had asked you to come on Bharat Vichar, the first question, a contentious one. A lot of people think that the rigged election of 1987 was the prelude to the 1989-1990 violence that finally led to the exodus of the Hindus from the Kashmir Valley. However, that is not true. I believe it started from 1947 onwards, and then there were many other instances. I would like you to talk about that in detail.
You can consider 1987 rigged elections as the tipping point.
Okay.
It's when the people decided, the boys decided to rebel openly. Now they went up against the state openly. They openly asked Pakistan for help, right? So you could call it the tipping point, but you're clearly right that it didn't start from 1987, of course. It's always been there since 1947. Kashmir has always been the unfinished business of partition for the Pakistanis. In their minds, after 1947, Kashmir is something that should have come to them just because the population is Muslim, right? That's the two-nation theory. We broke that theory. They themselves broke that theory when Bangladesh became free in 1971. They are themselves responsible for it because they considered Bangladeshis as, the other. And I think Sara Kissa Bengali language ko leke tha when they lost the elections and finally they decided to become free. Pakistan, since what my research has come up with, exactly 1947, when they lost Kashmir to India, jab hamara accession hua, when the Maharaja signed the pact, called the forces, as the raid started, because now they were trying to usurp it. And you have to understand why they couldn't usurp Kashmir is because of the locals as well. Maqbool Sherwani is supposed to be our hero because he confused them throughout the night in the bylanes of Baramulla, and hence they couldn't reach Srinagar on time. And it gave time to the Dakota flyers to reach the Srinagar airport, which actually had to be built quickly to level it so that the planes could land. And Mr. Menon had already taken the instrument of accession. So, all these dramatic happenings happening in 2 or 3 days. Surprisingly, mainland Indians don't know the story, they don't know that. And immediately, 1947 में आपको Pakistani officer की book पढ़नी पड़ेगी. I will try and put the link to you. I will share it with you.
Akbar, if I'm not.
Yes, he wrote exactly the plans that they had, and those plans eventually were fortified in 1965, which is known as Operation Gibraltar, when Ziaul Haq was there in power. And that is eventually what became the ISI's Ghazwa-e
65 was
Hind.
Ayub Khan.
I think General Ziaul Haq might not have been the general, but remember, he had been fighting in the Middle East. He was just starting in the ranks.
He had butchered Palestinians in Jordan, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Ayub Khan had taken him into confidence. So these plans, Ziaul Haq had already known about them.
Oh, really?
Operation Gibraltar. Yes.
So he was a rising star in the Pakistani army.
Yes. The intelligence unit was already there. Okay. So, eventually it became the Ghazwa-e Hind, and it hasn't stopped as yet. Bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. The policy is still there.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto famously declared that.
And Kashmir just happens to be one of them.
But it seems Pakistan is cutting itself with million cuts. I mean, anyway, but I don't want to talk about Pakistan. I want to again come back to Kashmir after 1965. But But my question is that
so this secessionism has always been there. I call it the progeny of the Mirpuris, because the JKLF started from Gilgit-Baltistan. Amanullah Khan is a Gilgit-Balti. I call them the progeny of Mirpuris because they have a huge lobby in London, where the JKLF headquarters are. You know the history of the JKLF. They murdered Mr. Matre, the Maqbool Bhatt and all that. When he was in Tihar jail, he was hung because
they killed also 4 Air Force officers.
That is later in the 90s, yes. That
1990.
And that is Yasin Malik. Yes,
Yasin Malik.
Yes. But I'm talking of a much older one, Maqbool Bhatt's time, when he actually was a bank robber and he was handed over to the police by the locals themselves. Ye story kisi ko, yaad nahi hai, pata nahi hai, younger generation ko batate nahi hai, wo mante nahi hai. Lekin he was a bank robber. He actually stole the locals here, and they handed him over to the police. Some say that he was a double agent as well. If you have to read the Pakistani side, they say that he was a double agent. Then we have had our own hijacker, Hashim Qureshi, hijacking the Ganga, plane, Indian Airlines plane.
1971.
Yes, this has all been throughout. It's just the unfinished business of partition. Somehow in their minds it is that the Muslim state should have gone to Pakistan. You also have to understand the fact that there was no social media, there was no technology. There was no way absolutely of knowing what is happening to the other side. Okay. 1990s onwards, this fascination for Pakistan started cracking. Like I've also said, my own uncles, my own cousins, my own father, they were very fascinated with Pakistan. Jo thoda bahut clippings dikhai jati thi on national television, DD pe, they used to see a very rich country, with all these cars and Mercedes and beautiful roads and flyovers, and which is true because, Pakistan had a capitalistic policy, I feel, in the 80s. Their economy was much better than ours. But post 90s, as India started growing and technology came, satellite TV came, mobile came, internet came, everything came. We started, we started connecting with the families across because, Kashmir is divided. And we saw things there. I was astounded to know that there was no university, Central University in POK, Muzaffarabad. No proper roads. Even the houses were made of mud and all till the 90s. 2000 ke baad though they have had some development. Achha, I didn't even know that they're supposed to sign a pact if they start a business that they're never going to ask for azadi. So, compared to that, we are very privileged. We also had the special status till 2 years back. So this bubble has started shattering in the minds of the Kashmiris. So you can attribute it to that. One is Pakistan's foreign policy. Constantly, these Mirpuris whose progeny have been left behind in Kashmir, who keep instigating and bring a radicalized Islam to Kashmir, telling them that their place is with Pakistan. Secondly, you also have to realize the fact that they had this Palestinian and Israeli thing going on. And in the 1970s, Kashmir University had exchange programs. Palestinians used to come and study with us. Unka open tha because, of the non-alignment policy, non-alignment policy. Indira Gandhi and, you heard Fidel Castro's speech when they came to New Delhi, non-alignment movement. Palestinians used to study. And that is where this whole concept of, what you call it's a Hamas playbook, this morality brigade and this self-determination that the Jews, the Yehudis are, responsible for it. तब तक कोई anti-Hindu वो jargon था नहीं language में. धीरे-धीरे वो anti-Hindu jargon आने लगा because if you can do it to the, you can be anti-Semitic, you can be anti-Hindu as well. तो वो काफिर वाफिर का वो जो सारा है वो सारा later बाद में आने लगा वहाबी Salafism. But till the 70s, you had Palestinian exchange students in Kashmir University. You had these students going to Aligarh Muslim University and coming back and teaching others, right? You had this educated class going to AMU and coming back, which is, one of my uncles also. And they came back with this secessionist mindset from AMU. They heard the story of the Muslim League. They got fascinated with the Muslim League. And, I believe AMU still keeps supported of Mr. Jinnah there.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So that thing, what you say ki ye pehle bhi tha, is a part of all this. And it's taken us years to study it and understand ki, acha, this is what was happening in our parents' generation. This is what was happening during our grandfather's times. Fantastic. And hopefully my generation and future generations, of course, will come out of this mindset. Yes.
Well, thank you,
So
Ashia.
1987 is the tipping point.
Tipping point.
But that's when they openly decided, and I blame the Indian state for it, because they should have let it. It's a democracy. If the MUF, the Muslim United Front, which was a precursor to the JKLF, the Hijab, and everything, all these tanzeems, it was a precursor to it. If they had won the elections, they could have let them rule, and the locals would have understood what kind of a rule it is. At least wo test ho jata, and the locals would have understood that this is not for us.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
But
because,
you interfered, the state interfered, and Mr. Yusuf had won the elections from one of my constituencies, and he crossed over, and today you know him by the name of Sayyid Salahuddin.
Sayyid Salahuddin. Well, thank you, Ashia, for being so, talking about the entire historicity of what took place in Kashmir from 1947 till 1990. We all know what happened after that. There was a lot of, we fought back, but now things are changing. Now, recently you wrote an article titled "Patriotism is the Last Refuge of the Scoundrel," in which you say that you have spent more than 20 years exposing the obscurantist, elite, dynasty, and politicians of Kashmir who have, well, practically bled, I think, say, two generations, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
two and a half generations, if that is fair to say.
Yes.
If you could expand on that.
See, I see the trajectory that India is going towards. It's not yet a Hindu Pakistan, but I can see signs a little bit of it. It's never going to be a Hindu Pakistan. I have a lot of tremendous faith in the majority, because a lot of Hindus have spoken up for human rights violations in Kashmir. A lot of Hindus criticize their own religion, and they're accepted. A lot of Hindus, lapsed Hindus, cultural Hindus, believer Hindus, whatever, they have this very clear sense of, democracy and human rights and minority rights. A large part of them, right? Forget about the far extremist in the Hindus. I can see the trajectory that India is going to, and when I see these small incidents coming up, like picking up a poor Muslim chap on the road and telling him Bharat Mata ki Jai bolo. It's happened with me as well, bullying in my workplace, right? For me, it's normal because of the way, the atmosphere that is there in the country today. For me, it's normal. But why I wrote this article is because I've seen it in Kashmir. Kashmiri nationalism is again the same thing. Patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. If you see the people who wanted to dictate to us what our life would be in the 1990s when it started, the first diktat which came from the militants was, please cover your head. Nobody's going to wear jeans. Cinema houses were closed down. Parlors were closed down, right? Wine shops were closed down. Every secular Muslim was targeted. There are assassinations happening. KPs, selective high-profile KPs were targeted and assassinated. So, this fringe lot started to dictate terms for us. And for me, they were scoundrels. They are still scoundrels who believe that only Muslims can live in Kashmir, that we cannot have a coexistence.
Under the cloak of patriotism.
Under the cloak of patriotism. I mean, Kashmiri
hypocrisy,
nationalism. What is Kashmiri nationalism? How come? Start your ancient history. I mean, start from the Vedic times. Even start from BC. I mean, Hyun San, Fahim. I mean, we are mentioned in ancient books as Kashmira. The Greek ambassador who came here, Megasthenes, and other people. I mean, we have a whole cultural and religious and spiritual connection with India. I mean, for me, India still is, Hind still is from Kabul to Kerala. It still is. It's just modern boundary lines. Culture same hai. Buddhism had gone to Kandahar, Mahabharata, Gandhara is, right? It's right. So these punks, I call them punks, I call them wannabe Rambos. They come up with, because somebody has told them some things, and for their own political affiliations, what radical Islam is basically all about. And they come up and they start dictating ki aapka ye hoga. Acha, as a liberal, I listen to them also. I asked them what was the plan. The Hurriyat has these minions. So what happens is, I was a very outgoing person, outspoken person. I would sit down and ask them, okay, tell me, if you get Azadi, what is your plan? as a state, what are your resources, and आपकी जो highway है, national highway है, वो India खुला रखता है, border roads organization, 3 महीने वो बंद रहती है because of the snow fall and all, and they make it a point to open it within days, so that the essential goods come into the valley. I've seen it when you people blocked it once because of the agitation in 2010, and I saw how much the valley suffered because the highway was blocked by the miscreants, the mobs. So what are you going to do? What is it exactly that you're feeling? They have these utopian ideas, which unfortunately this Turkish series today, the Ertugrul is also, ossifying that mentality ki Iran is going to help us. We are going to trade with Pakistan once the Mughal road opens up. And no concrete thing. Ki what if, you don't have any navy, there is no, port or anything. You just have a few points to enter the valley, a few passes. If you see the geography,
Yes.
there are very few passes to leave. It's a basin. There is no drainage, I mean, they haven't read the geography and all that. And you put these questions across, they have absolutely no idea what the plan is after Azadi. Then you bring in the Chinese factor. Ki why would China leave you? Why do you think that China is going to leave you? And they are like, no, they, they are friends of Pakistan, so they'll be helpful to us, and not realizing it's a communist state. Now look at the complexity. This is a state which is building itself on religious lines, exactly as Pakistan was made, and they are trying to rely on a communist state for their protection from India.
Fascinating. I think in 2010 they had to airlift some of the essentials to the Kashmir Valley.
2014 floods too.
2014 floods. Modi went out of his way to ensure that the people were helped. Now, the next question that I want to ask is that even though the Kashmiri Pandits were at the receiving end.
Again, let me make it clear. I am saying this that the Kashmiris think like this, but please understand, when I refer to Kashmiris, I mean the elite class.
Right.
The elite class holds the dynastic politics. They hold the narrative, and the narrative is dispersed through the media. The narrative is dispersed through preachers in the mosque. The narrative is dispersed through community elders, right? Which are again from the elite class. When I say elite class, it means obviously the rich and the poor, capitalist and ye, ठीक है? When I say elite class, हमारे में भी ये होता है. Unfortunately, we have inherited whatever was left of the caste system. So we also have this lower caste and upper caste there. So when I say that, I mean the elite, the ashraf. There are new words we are learning these days,
yes.
Pasmanda and all that. So
ashraf and ajlaf.
Ajlaf and all. So Kashmir mein ye words so use nahi kiye jate, but you have the lower, the Safai Karmacharis, who is known as the Vatul. You have the houseboat walas. They reside in the houseboat. They are known as the Hanjis, not looked upon very well. Then you have the Shia-Sunni conflict, of course. Then you have other subsects also. There will be somebody from the. There are lots of subsects and other things in this. So when I refer that the Kashmiris' mentality is like this, I don't mean the common people. The common people live very harmoniously. Even today, when you go back to a neighborhood in a common mohalla, they still cry for their Pandit neighbors. They miss them. I miss them. Eid हमारी थोड़ी हमारी होती थी. हमारे घर तो कश्मीरी पंडित आते थे. वो हमारी ईद होती थी. Because ईद के दिन कोई अपना घर छोड़ के नहीं जाता है. ईद है ना घर में. So जो guest आएगा वो कश्मीरी पंडित ही आएगा. Why would you want to leave your house during Eid? We used to go and meet the relatives on the second day. लेकिन first day पे जो हमारे घर आते थे वो कश्मीरी पंडित होते थे. And I still remember the shirni and the that mixture of nuts and fruits and वो लेके आते थे. And that is आज भी शंकराचार्य टेम्पल में जो चढ़ावा है वो many Muslim घरों से जाता है. Shankaracharya temple is an ancient temple on the hilltop of Shankaracharya, right? You'll have to study that. I hope that you pick up pictures and all that.
There is another peat there, important mutt there.
Sharda Peeth is unfortunately in POK these days. But yes, Sharda Peeth. It was known as Sharda Peeth. Kashmir was known as Sharda Peeth. I've written an article for that, and I've written that article in the Pakistani portal. So it's something. Well,
actually, Kashmir used to be a center for very higher learning.
Yes,
that is a fact. Vedas and all
absolutely.
That. Music is also quite.
Takshila is today in Pakistan, but it had its proximity with Kashmir. And Kashmir ki jo ancient universities hai, like we had one in Patan, and there is a hilltop pe, there are viharas. The viharas used to be our universities. And Kashmiri scholars were so great that no manuscript was distributed into the subcontinent unless and until the Kashmiri scholars had put a stamp to it. Right? Abhinav Gupta is known as the Aristotle of the East. We produced him, his poetics, excellent. Then there are many. Panini, the grammarian, is ours. Suya, the first engineer, right? Suya. Sopur is named after Suya, the engineer, who, used a technique to block the river so that he could build a bridge over it. So, we have our Archimedes also, right? Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras in the valley because the valley has a very pleasant climate. That should explain to you why British officers used to prefer to go to Kashmir and Muri in Pakistan. It has the same climate.
Yes, that is a fact. Even in South, the British chose Wellington. It's near, it's in Tamil Nadu, Ooty, Kodaikanal. So they needed the temperate climate here to.
They were just few of these hill stations, Kashmir and Shimla and Muri in Pakistan, and even POK has these hill stations. So yes, the British chose them selectively.
Anyway, so the next question that I want to ask is that even though the Kashmiri Pandits were in the receiving end, why is that somehow they are demonized at international stages? I still remember that hearing that they did where Aarti Tikku Singh and Sunanda Vashisht went, and they put forth their case most eloquently in the most civilized manner. And yet, Kashmiri Pandits have been at the receiving end, even though they never picked up a gun, they never shot at their neighbors. And I don't want to even get into those stories where women were attacked, raped, men were brutally murdered. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different saga. But the question is that the Kashmiri Pandit never took up arms. So how come they say that you have left? So what is the reason to come back and why they are being demonized? And lastly, is the word Pandit, which is usually referred to Brahmins, used by the left in a very derogatory manner? Are they using it against us?
I can't say that. I am in touch with left groups. I've never heard them use it in a derogatory manner. Pandit is a scholar. And in fact, my surname is Bhatt, and my ancestors must have been Brahmins, because Bhatt again means from the scholarly class. I am Malik by marriage. So I don't know if the left uses it. I've not heard them use it, and I'm very much in dialogue with the left.
When this Twitter's CEO Jack Dorsey had came to India, he was holding this flag called "End Brahmanism" and all that. And Kashmiri Pandits are Brahmins, so
mainland Indians, even mainland Indians think of the Kashmiri Pandits as something exotic because they eat meat and many of the sects in Hinduism do not. So for them, the KPs are already an exotic community. They can't understand them. I talk to mainland Indians and they're like, "Hame wo samajh mein nahi aate hain."
No, I lived in Delhi for 37 years and I've had Kashmiri neighbors. And I used to think that what are they complaining about? These they look like Englishmen, Goras, and must be well off. And now they are doing quite well.
Indians, that's the thing. Indians are racist, right? And for them
in a way, I was a bit of a racist. I mean, but I don't know. I had
they can't fathom the KPs because of their if you see Aarti, she's fair and green eyes, and this is something of a DNA from Alexander's army, right? But I hope there's a human genome project and they can actually trace it. See, mainland Indians also don't understand the KPs. But that's a story, that's a discussion for different things. You asked me why they are demonized.
Yes.
See, the first thing is that the KPs, आपकी जो माँ सरस्वती है, माँ लक्ष्मी है, right? It's always जो मैं देखती हूँ पढ़ाई, studies, विद्या को बहुत importance दिया जाता है. The books are revered in. I've been to Pandit homes. I've had Pandit teachers. My dad was taken in one of the winters, harshest winters of Kashmir, when he had his matriculation exam by a Kashmiri Pandit tutor in his home, because my grandfather was in jail and my grandmother couldn't afford his studies. So all we have ever seen in the Kashmiri Pandit home is books. It's always books, heaps and heaps of books. Now, take, for example, the Kashmiri Muslim home. You won't find many books. I'm not talking about the present scenario. I'm talking about the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, right? The 70s, the 80s. because we've been told that the Quran is the all. You don't need to read anything else. Secondly, this life is nothing. There is an afterlife. Okay. So what happened that the KPs, obviously because of their knowledge and because of their expertise and because of, you know, being generally intelligent and smart, they were into all the upper posts and all. They got the jobs and all. So what is coming out now, what they're using this fact as, I call it the Maridu Rai approach. Maridu Rai wrote a book, Muslim Subjects, Hindu Rulers, right? So she's given the impression that, and since she's an academician, she's given the impression that the Hindu kings were very brutal to the Muslim population, completely missing the fact that they were poor KP families as well, that they were rich Kashmiri Muslim families as well. It's a mixture, right? And this is one thing that I tell you why KPs are demonized. It's the narrative which has come out. It's a twisting of facts. It's something that should fit the leftist narrative and the Islamist narrative that, you know, the KPs were brutally torturing us itne sare decades mein, and we need azadi. It's nothing like that. It's far from the truth. So the best thing to do is to demonize them. That they're taken away all our jobs. Taken away the jobs? What do you mean by taken away? Merit tha. It's only in the 60s when the Kashmiri Muslim boys started going to Aligarh and came back as lawyers and doctors and engineers. You can hear it from the old timers, and they were put into responsible jobs. And if you see the first IAS officers, kaun the Muslims the, and it all starts from the 60s, you know, when this whole mentality started to change, that they needed to study. And at that time, you have to understand who was the chief minister, whose government it was, and everything. So this is one fact. You know, it's the culture of Vidya, that the KPs were in positions, strong positions to make policies. And of course, India's RAW is being started by a KP. You know, they pick up these small details.
Ramnath Kao.
Right? And then you have Mr. DP Dhar. He was the Russian ambassador to India, again a KP. So this is how they pick up these things. He was in Indira Gandhi's cabinet and all. And
P.N. Haksar was also a Kashmiri Pandit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So, you know, you mostly have these Kashmiri Pandits. And then suddenly there's this one towering Kashmiri Muslim, Sheikh Abdullah. And a very dubious thing. First, he is for, you know, this friendship with Nehru and quit Kashmir movement. And, you know, Kashmir is an integral part of India till the 1950s. And suddenly 53, he's like meeting the American senators on the sly. And of course, Nehru had to imprison him because he didn't trust him now. So, you know, all of this is helpful in demonizing the KPs. Why the KPs are demonized internationally? Again, in the congregational hearing that you tell me that Aarti spoke and Sunanda spoke, they were against the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, Ilhan Omar is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood has been successful in placing her there in the stupid Biden government, right? Or Trump's government at that time.
She's an elected congresswoman.
The Muslim.
She's an elected congresswoman from Minnesota, and she came as a refugee.
Yeah, and and this is how the Muslim Brotherhood has been very, very successful in doing that. They've been doing it all over. I mean, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and first you had that lady with the hijab. She was this Palestinian born in New York.
Linda Sarsour.
Sarsour, yes, Linda Sarsour, and eventually she, you know, showed her true colors, and the women.
Now she has been sidelined. She's in a bit of a hibernation, but Ilhan Omar.
So
Ilhan Omar is on the rise right
I don't think it was Aarti's failure. I don't think it was Sunanda's failure. I think they were very successful. It's just that they were against the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been, you know, slyly and covertly placing people all over the globe. Today, it's a civilizational fight against the Muslim Brotherhood. Jiska version India mein hai. You have the Simi, and then you have the, you know, Indian Mujahid, and in PFI. Kashmir you have the Hizb and the Jamaat-e-Islami. You have the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda. These are all mushrooms under one umbrella, right?
Right. But see, what I was saying
demonizing the KPs in West is very easy because you are up against a whole ecosystem of the Muslim Brotherhood.
So basically, Sunanda Vashisht and Aarti Tipu Singh went against Muslim Brotherhood, but they were somehow able to turn it into saying that they are Islamophobe. And that is brilliant. I mean,
that's the tactic.
That's a strategy.
That's something even I get, you know, being from the Muslim community, I get it too. The correct word is Muslimophobe, because Islamophobia is a misnomer. Anybody who starts criticizing Islam is, it's a very, very clever tactic to, just say Britain's hands are tied, because if Britain does anything against the Islamists, they're immediately termed as racists, right? Considering their history of colonial, empire and everything, it's taken them a long, long time to wake up to the fact that they have the problem of Islamism amongst their neighborhoods, that their whole British culture is changing. Now, France has done it on time. France has understood, and France knew that it was losing its people unless they actually, stood up to Islamism, not Islam, Islamism. And France is not afraid of being called racist. Britain is.
Britain is in a lot of trouble, but Germany is also bringing in some new law. Anyway, Ashia, I'm going to ask you
the. Continuing this, continuing this, what was your question again?
No, I think the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, conveniently managed to spin a narrative that Aarti and Sunanda were
Islamophobe,
right. And
so even I get this that I'm an Islamophobe. Why shouldn't I be phobic of something which told me at the age of 15 to cover my head or I will be acid attacked? Why wouldn't I be afraid of that? It's an ideology. So you can't say that Islamophobe means that you're racist. Of course there are Islamophobes. Why wouldn't I be phobic of it? You're phobic of something that harms you. The correct word terminology is Muslim phobia or anti-Muslim bigotry, which I'm against.
Obviously.
Right? Obviously, everybody's against that. But Islamophobia is just created to shut down the debate. In fact, the person who coined it has actually retracted his statement. It happened to be a Western author. You'll have to Google the name and everything. So he eventually retracted and said, "I didn't know it would catch up like this," and it's being used to shut down debate in Islam whenever there's a critic or dissenter or a doubter. So Islamophobia is a very incorrect word. They were twisted and turned into as Muslim phobes, which is what is a typical tactic of the Muslim Brotherhood, of the Hizb ut-Tahrir, of Hamas playbook, and of the Hijab, and of the Jamaat Islami, and even Indian organizations. Anybody today, if I come up on TV, I'll be straight. In fact, I'm being termed as a Islamophobe, which they mean as Muslim phobe. I'm not a Muslim phobe. I am very proud of the heretic traditions in my culture, in my religion. And you haven't accepted that. You can't call me an Islamophobe or a Muslim phobe. You are Muslim phobes because you're not accepting your dissenters or doubters or critics.
Well, irony is that
to quote Arundhati Roy, when she was asked why she's so anti-India, she said, it comes out of love. You love your country so much that you want it to get better. So I'm doing the same thing. I love my heritage. I'm proud of my heritage so much that I have to criticize it. That you please become a better version of it.
It's like a husband hitting his wife and saying that I love her so much, that's why I hit her. I mean, this nonsense has been sold.
I can use her quote. I can use her quote to herself, right?
No.
If somebody accuses me of being a Muslim phobe.
No. Actually, the irony is that during his lifetime, Prophet Muhammad actually never called any Muslim a heretic. Even if there was disagreement,
there are traditions.
There were debates and all. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. The last question is
no. Let me clear it, since you have an audience. There is no earthly retribution for apostates or ex-Muslims or atheists or dissenters or doubters in Islam. No earthly retribution.
That is right.
The Quran doesn't say any earthly retribution. आपका कोई हक नहीं है किसी को बोलना वो मुस्लिम है या नहीं है. क्या पता जो नहीं नमाज पढ़ रहा है उसने covertly किसी को help किया हो. He is a much better Muslim in the eyes of God than somebody going to the mosque 5 times a day. क्या पता? It's between God and the person. There may be divine retribution. We don't know whether I'm going to hell or heaven. We don't know. And it's up to me and my God. You are nobody to tell me whether I'm a true Muslim or not. So there's no earthly retribution. And because of this, what the mullahs, later came up with the hadith, they later came up with dubious hadiths, they ossified the religion, they, hijacked the whole core message. And today they use these hadith and seerah and the jurisprudence law and everything to give fatwas, which is again earthly retribution. There is no earthly retribution in the Quran. It's not up to you. It's between them and their God, and He will decide what will happen to them after death.
That is true. Now, I'm going to ask you the last question. 2024, we'll be having our general elections again.
Right.
And we are almost halfway into the first, we're almost finished with our first quarter of this year. Where do you see Kashmir Muslims, Kashmir Pandits by 2024?
I used to be very pessimistic about Kashmir. I felt it's gone to the dogs because of the radicalized thing, and I felt there was no coming back. But then I have started having hope since a decade, because youngsters reached out to me, people reached out to me, and they were tired of the violence. They wanted peace. And a miracle happened, and Article 370 was nullified. It's been 2 years now. Slowly, the people have accepted the fact. The recent DDC elections that we had, they will show you that the people have accepted the reality that they are no longer a special status state. It's a union territory, right? In 2024, I am hoping that the Kashmiri Pandits and Muslim organizations, which are actually working on the ground for the common people, they will reach some sort of negotiation wherein hopefully the Kashmiri Pandits can settle back. I don't want colonies for them. I don't want ghettos for them. I want them to buy land and settle in neighborhoods. But of course, they will have to be given guarantees that their lives are safe. And Abhi, it doesn't seem like that, because, we recently had this person being murdered. One of the oldest dhabas, Krishna Dhaba, yes. Right?
The son died
and
today.
The boy
actually
died today at 3:20 a.m. It's been a very difficult day. He's practically family in a sense that, my grandfather's generation, father's generation, my generation has grown up with that landscape ki Krishna Dhaba hai wahan pe. Even if people lived in 5-star hotels along the Dal Lake, they would still come and eat at the Krishna Dhaba. And he was hardly 22,
just
had a
kid.
whole life ahead of him. It's just a kid. For me, he's a baby.
Yeah.
And 2024, I hope that certain level of negotiation has been reached. I'm not expecting them to physically start living there yet, because it's not safe. But these political dynastic class will have to be done away with. These separatist groups will have to be done away with. I don't want the Dulat doctrine to be repeated. Do you understand what is the Dulat doctrine? I don't want any money to be given to the
A.K. Dulat, the former Raw
Dulat
chief.
Doctrine, right? Yeah. I don't want Mr. Duval to, start the same doctrine again of appeasing the separatists, because then it creates a problem for us pro-Indians there. Because then you're funding the terrorists in an indirect way. They tell you, the Hurriyat will tell you, yes, they are pro-India, but they'll be harboring terrorists, they'll be sending them money, and then there will be these targeted assassinations. So India has to put its foot down, first of all, if they really need the Pandits to come back.
Thank you so much, Ashia. I think that's about it for this episode.
I hope we continue, because I'm sure you have a whole lot of questions.
No, I do. But then that means extending.
No, I'm talking about some other day.
I want to keep it specific. I'll be working on a few more questions. Hopefully, we will get back together again and do this talk on Kashmir and make people aware of what is happening in Kashmir. People don't realize that, especially in South. Though I was born in Delhi, but I'm a Tamilian and I live in South India. So I want to let the people of South also know that, Kashmir and Kanyakumari, not much difference, because Adi Shankaracharya left Kerala and went to Kashmir, and he created Sharda Peeth. So yes. I want that message to go through, and not to think that, if you go to Kashmir, you're going to get shot because all the Muslims in Kashmir are bad. And I want to end that impression across India. So I'm trying. Let's see what happens. So hopefully we'll get back next time and have more conversations, and you'll be able to clear more, doubts or apprehensions or misapprehensions about Kashmir. Arshia Malik, thank you so much for coming to Bharat Vichar. Thank you.
Namaste.